Now, should this stuff be considered contraband at this point? Hey everyone, and welcome back to the network, where today we're taking a look at some more console mods and accessories from over at AliExpress. Now, given the current state of the way things are, specifically with the US and China, this is probably going to be the second to last AliExpress video, at least for a while, because unless something's going to happen, these are going to be way too expensive to, be taking a look at. Now, as always, the links will be provided down below in case you want to pick any of this stuff up for yourself, as well as at the top of the screen somewhere I will have the price for each of these items, or at least the price that I paid when I went to order this. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's take a look at what's inside the bag. So, the first item that we have here is a Wii Sensor Bar, and it came just like this, with the edge of the plastic completely ripped open. And there is a flap right here. There was a door, but there's no point in the door when the thing's blown right open. But taking a look at our sensor bar, this looks to be pretty much identical to the one that you get from the Wii. It feels pretty much the same, which says a lot, actually, in just terms of like the OEM sensor bars and how cheaply those are made. But you'll notice that this thing, instead of it going to that weird little red connector or orange connector that it usually has, this one actually is USB. So you could in theory use this with the PC in case you wanted to play some games with Dolphin using the Wii remotes, which would actually be pretty nice. I should test that out at some point. You could also use this with the Xbox 360 in case you have the shotguns from Cabela's, because those required a sensor bar, and if you pick them up secondhand, you're probably not getting the sensor bar, But yeah, so this thing is USB powered instead of the weird proprietary connector, so that is pretty nice. And then it also comes with a little acrylic mounting stand and a piece of tape. Now, I'm not sure how this connects in. Does it just go like that? I guess so. There's nothing holding that in there. I guess it withstands the shake test a little bit. Oh, never mind. But yeah, so that is the sensor bar. We'll go ahead and we'll connect this thing up to the Wii and see if it works. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but I'll go ahead and set that up real quick, and we can go ahead and give it a test. Okay, so now we are over at our Nintendo Wii, and we have our USB sensor bar. So to test this thing out, what we'll do is disconnect the original sensor bar from the back of our Wii. So here is the original sensor bar cable. You can see it's got a little orange speck on there and whatnot, so I'll just put that over here to the side so it doesn't fall back there and then I lose it forever. And we'll connect the USB one to one of the USB ports in the back. Now I have this flash drive right here sticking out of the back of my Wii because this is the modded Wii that was in the How to Mod a Wii tutorial from like 4 years ago, so it's a trooper. It's still holding up in case you were concerned about the longevity. But now that I have the sensor bar all connected, I'll just set this on top of the PS2 right here because, I don't feel like unhooking the little cable back there, so our wire length is a little short, and then we'll just turn it on and we'll give it a little test. So it is actually near impossible to see on the actual camera, but using my phone you can see that the sensor bar's little UV lights are in fact on, and it looks like we have 3 on this side and 3 on that side, but that middle one is kind of dim. So we'll test it and we'll see how well it works. I'm assuming it'll work just fine, but we will, again, see in the test. Now, I tested the sensor bar out with a variety of games, and I can report that there doesn't seem to be any apparent flaws with it. It seems to be working just fine, even though there are significantly fewer LEDs than what are on the OEM sensor bars. But overall, that's pretty good, and it's a decent replacement in case you needed one for your Wii or your Wii U. But with that being just about the end of this, let's head back over to the table and take a look at our next item. Alright, next up we have ourselves some thumbsticks, and these are not any old thumbsticks. These, I believe, are for the Xbox One. Let me double check what that says. Yes, it says right on there, the Xbox One Slim controller or the PS4. I'm not sure if these would work on the PS4, but I don't know, maybe. However, these look to be like their Xbox One thumbsticks, and as you can hear from me rattling them around, these are actually made out of metal. So these are aluminum kind of shaped or machined thumbsticks for the Xbox One controllers. And the reason I say they're Xbox One over like PS4 is because it has that sort of concaved effect with the little ridges along the side, which you can kind of see. But yeah, they're pretty much your standard thumbsticks, although instead of them being made out of plastic, you can have that quality like metallic feel slash finish. So we'll go ahead and grab an Xbox One controller, tear it apart, and then see if we we can insert these thumbsticks and give them a little test, see how well they perform. Now, to install these aluminum analog stick covers, I have this Xbox One controller, like the original Xbox One controller, because it's missing the share button. But this controller has stick drift, according to this little sticker I put on there. So I feel like it's a good candidate to install these aluminum thumb caps in, and then use one of the stick drift fix, like little micro solder boards that we took a look at in one of these previous videos, and take that and install it in here and get it all calibrated. So without any further ado, let's get this controller apart so that we can install these new thumbsticks. Okay, so now that I have all 5 of the screws removed from the controller, we can actually take the faceplate off, and that's pretty much all we need in order to install these thumbsticks, because you have access to the caps right here. Now, I won't be installing the drift fix board like right now. That'll be something that I'll do, you know, later on, probably off camera. If you want to see more about that, I'll link it up in the cards, the other AliExpress videos, so that you can check out how you install that and get it tuned and all that. But for now, let's put our new thumbstick caps on. Ooh, they're actually fairly tight. This one's definitely a lot tighter than the original one was. This one was a heck of a lot looser. It does not look like it wants to go on there any further. Oh, actually, yeah, there we go. Okay, got it on there. And then just to simulate what it would be like having these in the controller without putting the whole thing back together, we'll just throw the faceplate back on and then give this a little test. I mean, they feel like they're, you know, pretty much like stock thumbsticks, although unlike with these plastic ones with the little rubber grips on the top, these, not being made out of rubber, should in theory not wear down unless you like take sandpaper or something to it. And it's actually kind of surprising that this controller has stick drift, because these thumbsticks actually feel really good. But I don't know, I guess it did have it at some point, otherwise I wouldn't have put that rip sticker on there. But yeah, I gotta say that having the aluminum thumbsticks contrasts rather well with the black controller. I do like the look of this. However, you know, it's just like a cosmetic add-on. Practically, these don't really change much about how the controller operates. It's pretty much the same old controller. So with that being said, let's head back to the table and take a look at our next item. All right, and next up we have ourselves a PS2 AC adapter. And as we can see on the packaging, it just says P2. I thought this said PS2, but nope, it's the P2 for the PS2 7000 series or 70,000 series. I believe that's correct. I'm pretty sure there's 70,000 on the Slim, right? Maybe it's 7,000. I'll have to double check that. And then on the side, it actually has a usage guide, which is interesting. I'm just going to take a moment, so if you wanted to pause and read this, you can. It seems to be pretty good English. On the back, we just have more stickers, but let's see what is on the inside, shall we? So we have the one end of the power cable that uses sort of like the PS3 style connector there with the double loops. And then we should have the AC adapter itself, which it feels really light and it looks generic, but it's also pretty close to what an actual PS2 power supply looks like. And I happen to have one right here that we can take a look at side by side. So on the original one, you can see at the top it does say Sony, where this one has nothing. Then it has 8.5 volts, AC adapter, and then you have the PlayStation 2 logo on the back. Actually, the official one seems to be orange, and the knockoff one is in sort of this burgundy red. So you can just kind of take a look at the differences for yourselves on what these look like. However, the real question is, does this AC adapter actually provide the correct voltages? So what I'm going to do is I have myself a little multimeter here, and what we'll do is plug both of these in, get the voltages, and then we'll kind of compare them and see if they are both outputting the correct 8.5 volts. So I'm just going to go and connect this thing up real quick, and then we'll give it a test. All right, so first off, we have the official Sony AC adapter. Now, unfortunately, I think these little plugs are too small for my probes to get in, so I have a little jumper cable here that we're going to stick in to the power socket. Now, if this is a functional power supply, we should get a reading of about 8.5 here. So as you can see up here, we are getting about the 8.5, a little higher than 8.5 volts out of the official power supply. So now we'll go on and connect the aftermarket AC adapter and see if we're getting indeed the 8.5 volts out of there. All right, so now we have our aftermarket AC adapter all wired up. So we can take our little jumper probe here, stick it in that operational end, then grab our ground lead and connect it. And let's see, what are we getting? Anything? Might help if we actually have the probe touching the thing now, won't it? Oh, okay, so that's interesting. We're actually getting 9.3 out of this power supply, as you can see. So we are pretty much an entire volt above what we are supposed to be getting out of here. So in the long term, is this going to cause that big of an issue? No, probably not, but that is kind of sus that it's actually putting out about a volt more than it's supposed to be doing. Keep that in mind in case you're going to get any of these aftermarket AC adapters, that they might not actually be giving the true amount of voltage that they're supposed to. So with that little discovery out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up real quick, and then we'll head on over to our last item. Okay, and now we are officially on to our last item. So without any further delay, let's cut into this thing. There we go. You gotta love how literally no matter what you buy from AliExpress, it always comes in these crappy little bubble mailers. Like, I have a war against these things ever since I was buying a lot of stuff on Amazon that was collector stuff, like the NES like collector's edition and whatnot, and they would freaking ship it in these stupid bubble mailers. And you know what happens when you put a nice box in a bubble mailer? The box gets absolutely wrecked. So I have a vengeance against those things. But enough with my dissatisfaction for bubble mailers. It looks like we have a thank you card that was thrown outside of the box. So it says, thank you, please rate it 5 stars, yada, 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 in the trash with that. And then we have a extremely tiny little box here, which houses a Game Boy FlashMaster Edition Pro region free. I guess it's a sticker. This is really weird how this is all set up with just bits kind of thrown everywhere, because typically their flash carts are pretty well packaged, but I guess, well, maybe this thing doesn't fit in there. Oh yeah, it doesn't, and they didn't want the corner to get wrinkled, so they just didn't throw it in. Okay, anyway, so we have our FlashMaster with 2 different stickers, 1 sticker in the bag, 1 sticker not in the bag. This one actually looks kind of fun. I like this one, but this one also is kind of nice, where it's got like the little Mario background on there. And then on the top, it does say Game instead of Game Boy. Now this is designed a little more like a Game Boy Color type of cartridge. However, this thing should work in the original Game Boy. It actually looks like the board is crooked in there slightly when you kind of look at the bottom, but that could just be me. And this one, I believe, has a included micro SD card, and it does, with a whole 8 gigabytes in there. A nice 8 gigabyte unbranded SD card. That's some good stuff right there. So we'll have to plug this into a console. My guess is probably like a Game Boy Advance, just so that if there are Game Boy Color games on here, we can actually, you know, test them. And I just now realized I don't think this thing actually came with instructions. No, it did not. So in terms of updating the firmware or adding games to it, you're kind of SOL, because it didn't actually include that. Now, before we end up testing this, let's attach one of our stickers. I think I kind of want to go with this GB FlashMaster one, because it looks a little more fun than that to go on our translucent black background. All right, and there we go. So now we have our nice GB FlashMaster sticker on there. We have a little what is that, graphic to show where the home button is, and then we can go slot this thing into a console and see what's on it. All right, and to test our GB FlashMaster Pro, I have the original Game Boy Advance that, you know, hasn't seen the light of day for quite some time. So I'm assuming that we can just insert this into the cartridge slot, and hopefully this thing works. I'm pretty sure it works. Oh, yep, there we go. We booted right into the Game Boy. Nice. Okay, so it looks like it's initializing, and then we have our pretty standard EverDrive menu, kind of similar to the Game Boy EverDrive X3, I believe, from Crix. This seems to be laid out pretty much the same, although this, unlike the other one, this has games preloaded. So we have Game Boy E, J, U, and UE. So I'm assuming that E would be Europe, J is Japan, U is United States, and UE is probably the United Emirates or something like that. And then we have The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX for France. For some reason that is put on the homepage. I'm not sure why that is. And then EDGB, I'm assuming this is probably the, you know, the files for the Flashcart to actually work. And then we also have Game Boy Color games. So let's take a look at one of the US games, because this is a US system. Okay, pushing start. Pushing start just loaded Amazing Tater, apparently. Okay, I'm not sure why it loaded Amazing Tater, but I guess here we are. Let's try this in normal, I guess. Hello, I'm Mato Tomato. blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it looks like this game is some sort of a puzzle game, I guess. Never heard of Amazing Tater, but there we go. I guess we completed we completed the first level of that. Now, in order to get back to the menu, either you can power cycle the Game Boy Advance, or if you click the little home button right here on the back of the cartridge, it should load us back into the main menu. Yeah, there we go. It did a nice little refresh, initializing the OS and all that. Okay, so cool. Now we are officially back in this menu. Now, I guess Start just loads your last ROM. That's why we got put into Amazing Tater. It doesn't seem like the A button actually does anything. Is B what we use? Okay, so B is what you use to go in there, and A is your back button. That's kind of weird that they reverse that, but maybe actually, aren't these switched on the original Game Boy? Isn't it A and then B? Maybe that's why. Who knows? Okay, so there's Amazing Tater. We got the Addams Family. We got a whole bunch of different Game Boy ROMs here. Let's try out Bionic Commando for the Game Boy. So we can see while it's loading, it has like a little green indicator light up there as it is flashing the ROM to the cartridge. And here we go. We are in Game Boy Bionic Commando. I wonder if this is going to be pretty similar to the one for the NES. I would assume that it could, because pretty much the Game Boy was just like a portable NES. It was slightly better, but, you know, pretty much the same thing. So I'm assuming that this is going to be pretty faithful in terms of it being a port to Game Boy. Yeah, so this actually looks a lot like Bionic Commando. I'm impressed. I mean, it's a little different. This guy's got more spiky hair. This is more like the Bionic Commando remake that Capcom put out on like the 360 and stuff, but seems to work just fine. So let's try out a Game Boy Color game. Again, we'll head back to the menu by pressing this home button, hopefully. I would say that it's almost easier just to power cycle it than to try to press that home button while it's inside of, you know, say a Game Boy Advance. On an actual Game Boy or a Game Boy Color, you know, you'd have the screen there, so there's not as much flex in the PCB, but for Game Boy Advance, I'd say power cycling's probably a better option than trying to, you know, push that home button to reset your system. Okay, so now we'll head into the Game Boy Color games. Let's see what they got going on here. There's an Austin Powers game. Oh, Behave. What the hell? I didn't know that there was an Austin Powers game on the Game Boy Color. I guess let's check that one out. This one is taking a lot longer to load than the other game. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that took a really long time for it to write the ROM to it. At least like, I don't know, 15 seconds. This is significantly longer than the Game Boy game, and it's still going technically. We'll just have infinite dots going. Okay, and here we go. We have our Game Boy Color game loaded. Oh my god, Rockstar published this game? What the heck? Maybe we should take a closer look at this Austin Powers game at some point. Austin Powers 2000, what the hell? So this thing kind of looks like DOS? What even is this? Wow, look at that image of Michael Myers. Holy cow, that is impressive. What the hell even is this game? There is so much to do. Okay, so before we wrap up this flashcard, let's grab a game to test and see if the save features work. And I think the game that we'll use to test that will be Metroid 2, because that is the quickest game to get to a save point. So I will find Metroid 2 in this list, because I'm assuming it's probably on here. No, it is not. Okay, so because there's no Metroid 2 on here, I believe The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening also used a battery save, so we can try that game out to test to see if this cartridge can actually, you know, save your game. Otherwise, that would just that'd kind of suck now, wouldn't it? Oh, interesting. So this is in the American ROM set, but it is in French. Fascinating. Very fascinating here. Okay, so I think we got far enough, so I'm going to go ahead and power cycle this device. And if we just hit start, it should load us back into the ROM that we already had selected, being Link's Awakening. And then we can test to see if my test save file is still on here. Okay, so here we are in the main menu. Click that button, and test is still there. So it does look like this cartridge will save your game, so that's awesome. All right, and with that, we covered pretty much everything this cartridge has to offer, because, you know, it didn't even come with instructions. So this is all I know it comes with. But with that being said, let's head back over to the table and wrap this video up. All right, now what do I think of this haul from AliExpress? And to be honest, honest, most of the items are pretty good. They work a lot better than anticipated. And I mean, a lot of these you kind of had to question, like, why would they not work, specifically with the sensor bar? Because like the original sensor bar with the Wii was pretty much just a bunch of infrared LEDs, and really all this thing did differently from it is cut down on the amount of LEDs for one, and then just switch the connection type from the proprietary thing to just a standard USB cable. So, you know, it works as expected. I mean, you can also achieve the same thing with a couple candles, so there's really no reason why this should not have worked. Then we have the PS2 adapter, or the PS2 AC adapter. Now, this thing, you know, albeit it will work with the console because it is outputting an adequate amount of voltage, it is, you know, still above, and because it's only 1 volt, it shouldn't cause too much of an issue, but potentially, you know, you could lessen the lifespan of your system with it receiving more voltage than it's supposed to. But for the most part, it should be alright. Then we have the analog sticks with the Xbox controller. Now, I didn't test this on a PlayStation 4 controller. I'm not sure if the little connection type on the bottom is the same as what's used on the Xbox. I'm assuming it is, because most controllers nowadays use the same sort of like analog potentiometer that this one does. They've been using the same one since pretty much the N64, if I'm being entirely honest. So these probably will work on there. They do look nice. They feel nice. The only real question is, would this cause, you know, more issues with the potentiometer over time? Because technically these weigh more than the plastic, but at that point you're getting, you know, into the niche minutia of it. And if you want these, go ahead and get these. You know, they're not the biggest issue in the world. And then finally, we have this GB Master Flashcart, and I would say this is a pretty good contender for the Flashcarts from Crix. It does operate pretty similar to the EverDrive X3, I would say. It is a little slower, though, in terms of writing. The EverDrive X3 writes to the flash memory significantly faster than this one does, so maybe this is based off of an older one. Now, this thing was actually pretty cheap, at least at the time when I bought it, at like $13 versus like, I believe it's $50 to get one of these from Crix. This, you know, if you're on a budget and you wanted to play a bunch of Game Boy Color and Game Boy games, this isn't the worst thing in the world. But yeah, so overall, I would have to say that this haul from AliExpress was pretty good. And again, unfortunately, given the current state of how things are, you know, there's like one more video left because I have the stuff here. But after that, I don't know. We'll have to see if we'll continue this series of testing more console mods and accessories from these direct from China sites. But with that, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, remember to drop a like and make that subscribe button glow so that you don't miss any future content. And if you have any suggestions for retro gaming accessories you'd like us to take a look at, be sure to leave it down in the comments or pitch it at our official Discord server, link down below in case you're interested in stopping by. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.